So then what
We're all
happens
dealing
if you're engaging with social media and you're getting nothing but abuse there, or you're engaging in a chat box and you're getting nothing but abuse there from people that are supposed to be more or less aligned with you on the arguments.
Yeah.
Then of course that is only increasing people's trauma. If people in the community aren't prepared to admit they're wrong, then how are we better than the mainstream?
Exactly.
And it can't be discussed if the attitude of the truther is it's chemtrails and they're spraying us and that's it, and I'm not having any other conversation. And the attitude of the non-chemtrailer is chemtrails are conspiracy theory, and I'm not going to get in because I don't talk to conspiracy theorists, right? Those two groups will never talk to each other.
Mike, welcome to what's become known as the dentist chair, I think, between the three of you.
Feels like it.
Yeah. No need to be nervous.
Sorry?
There's no need to be nervous. There's no pain involved. This knife doesn't go anywhere near you. I think, are you not used to necessarily talking about Mike Robinson? Is that perhaps why you feel?
I've avoided that all my life.
You've avoided that, or you're like, okay, well, this is the time to overcome those demons. I suppose what this aspect of the show is about is getting to know the people behind what we normally see.
Okay.
So strap in. I wanted to start by just asking you what the UK column means to you.
Oh, where do I start with that?
Well, obviously it's a big question, and it's wrapped up with your 20 years now, pretty much.
Well,
nearly
just getting close to. I mean, the column's 20 now. I'm not quite. I started a couple of years.
Yeah.
In. I hear a lot of people talking about struggling to cope with what's going on in the world, and they switch off and they have become, I hate to use the term, but they become non-playing characters, to use that term. So they're not taking part in anything. And so the column is 100% an outlet for all the kind of, any angst or any kind of fear or any kind of just stuff that it absolutely is a way to stick it to the people that are doing what they're doing to this world.
That's okay. That's an interesting way of putting it. So for you, it's a lot about empowering people. Is that primarily what you'd say?
And I'm going to say it absolutely starts with myself, but I hope that helps other people, empowers other people as well. That's the aim, at least.
In what way do you mean by starts with yourself?
Well, because what I mean is it starts with it is therapeutic in the sense that it helps deal with what's going on in the world, but it does it hopefully in a proactive way. It's in a productive way rather than just stressing about what's going on. We channel that energy into hopefully making something a little bit better. Yeah,
and ultimately. For me, the ultimate aim of everything that what we might call the movement is about is on very simple terms is to end unnecessary suffering, and we see a lot of suffering, which is perpetrated by these powers that be, whatever form we want to go into the details of that.
Right.
But that seems quite similar to what you're saying, that you want to empower people. Because they're struggling, aren't they? Like that's the first thing you said.
Lots of people are struggling. Yeah,
the first thing you said, and that's a very sort of empathetic way.
And I mean, I don't ever want to view myself as being any kind of role model. That's not the aim of it. But at the same time, if what we do here encourages other people to do something similar, then to some degree we've succeeded.
Yeah.
nothing's going to change unless people get directly involved.
What do you think? Now again, big questions. But what do you think stops people from actually getting involved a lot of the time?
With some people, there's no doubt fear is part of it. But equally, there's people have lost the sense of agency. People have lost the sense that they can actually do anything. They're looking at these, the billionaire class. It's not a trillionaire class.
Yeah.
And they're saying this to themselves: "This is too big. What can I do?"
Yeah.
And of course, as individuals, we can do very little. It's when people start cooperating and start collaborating, and then there's an opportunity to build something and do something that can beat these people. And there's been plenty of examples of it over the last 10 or 15 years that I can think of. Small victories, but small victories. Lots of small victories is what we should be aiming for.
Yeah. I just pick up on that because you said as individuals we can't do a lot, which on a practical level I completely agree with you. But we could talk about that a bit later because there is I think, and I perhaps you'd agree to some extent, there's an extent to which a lot of the work has to be done first with the individual, doesn't it? You have to almost prepare the ground. You have to be willing to look at stuff that is uncomfortable. Do you see what I mean? So I think that's part of the whole process, isn't it?
Yeah, but aside from that, a big part of this process is each of us sorting ourselves out.
Yeah,
it's not just about outward change; it's also about inner change, and that's a big part of this journey as well.
Yeah,
is how we develop as individuals.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I'm fascinated by the movement as a thing in itself. So we've got all the problems in the world that we're trying to either expose or find solutions for. I think it's a kind of joint process, isn't it? We have to expose the crap that's there, and then we also have to engage in some process of replacing it with something better. So that's a kind of, seems to me, the way. But
at the same time, the movement, I'm not sure that there is a movement.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to get to, and I think...
But we can maybe if you want to talk about that later, but I certainly have some views about the movement as it is at the moment.
Yeah, and we can start there if you want. We can start there because I think, one of the reasons I like doing the podcast and talking about this stuff is I to some extent I've stopped looking at the details because it got me so far, and it was necessary at a certain point in my life for a sort of 10-year period. And then there was a point where I found it was unnecessary almost to go beyond a certain amount of detail. And what I've sort of become more interested in is the psychology and the mind and what's actually going on with people, and how once we've agreed and understood that there is an agenda, that there is deception going on, then how do we move forward from that? And sometimes I listen to you and I feel a similar. I obviously you're very. Part of your job is to know a lot of detail. And when I listen to you and Germ and Charles, it's very impressive how much you know. And I think that, like I said to Brian, part of the UK column, the role is to provide that information. So it's absolutely vital. But I also think with you that there's a certain, I see a certain frustration at times with what people are doing with that detail. I don't know if that's fair. Maybe that would.
It is and it isn't. What frustrates me is when people who are in the movement, in inverted commas, become just as, if not more, ideological than people that are not in the movement.
Yeah.
And my view is that as much as we criticize and challenge and hold accountable what's going on in the broader world, we've got to criticize and challenge and hold accountable ourselves as well. And if we've decided that the truth is this little box over here, and everything then becomes closed, there's no discussion outside of that.
Yeah.
Well, that's not a truth movement.
Yeah.
Right. So
and that's where I agree with you absolutely 100%. And I think in a way, well, it's at least equally important that is addressed and becomes part of this conversation that we're having. Because if we just focus on facts, but we're not focusing on how we're responding to that and how we're navigating what we're discovering, then we're just going to keep repeating the same crap, really, it seems to me, which I think is similar to what you're saying. And, you see the abuse that is thrown within the movement at people.
This is the bit that I do find probably the most frustrating.
Yeah.
If there's genuinely a movement, then that movement should be, how do I put this? That movement should be empathetic, positive and empathetic to other people within the movement, even people that have slightly different views to yourselves.
Yeah.
And people should be supporting each other within a movement.
Yeah.
I see people wanting to rip each other's heads off more within the movement than outside the movement. It's quite incredible, and that just shouldn't be the way it is. And that's why that's part of the inner growth part of this as well, because you got to be willing to negotiate and talk and discuss instead of tearing each other to shreds.
So what is it then? Why is that manifesting? I've got my theories and how I see it, but what do you think really is at play with that infighting and the confrontation and the name calling and what's going on?
Immaturity, and I don't mean that in the sense that people are children. I just mean that where things stand at the moment, a lot of people have come to this very, very suddenly over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And they haven't had the experience yet. And also just the toxicity of social media and the pond that people are playing in, that rubs off. So, as much as we've got to engage with what is going on, we've got to also keep a separation. We've got to learn how to keep ourselves slightly aloof from the amount of nonsense that there is out there.
Yeah.
Right. And be very discriminating about what we're going to accept into our minds and into our hearts. Right. Because first of all, a lot of what's out there is bot driven. It's not real.
Yeah.
It's designed to wind people up.
Yeah.
And, so my view is that I said this many, many times. I understand people, a lot of people have come to this and have woken, I hate to use the term.
Yeah, I think we all do. I think we're all tired of that.
Yeah, woken up very, very suddenly. Yeah. And whereas, some other people have woken up gradually over 20, 30, 40 years. That's a much easier process.
Yeah, I think so.
And you end up being able to handle a lot of the stuff that's out there a lot better if you've managed to be able to do it over a longer period. If it's all been very sudden and it's come on you like a bomb burst, then I completely understand why there is a level of there's experience required, let's put it that way, and that's only time can resolve that.
Yeah, I think it can be overwhelming for people.
Yes.
But also, from my own experience over more than 25 years, you see you see your own how your own failings have come and gone, and how you've perhaps seen it from one perspective and then had that change. If I look at, say, the natural health alternative world, which is very parallel to the whole political thing, it's all tied in, but that's a certain aspect of the kind of awake community, looking at alternative health and pharmaceuticals and that whole thing. And then you've got a whole industry built up on alternative health. And, over the years, I've, bought this pill and this supplement and done this and thought that was the answer and tried this diet and, and then I think over that amount of time, you become a bit more humble, I suppose, because you realise that, well, 5 years ago I was eating a raw vegan and now I'm eating raw meat, it's, or whatever it might be.
You're eating
no, I'm not saying exactly, although I have done both of those things. But you see that the beliefs that you had, you don't hold now. But that's not to say we've abandoned the idea that big pharma's crap, and we need to find an alternative.
Last year, I won the Sussex Portrait Artist of the Year competition. It's a timed event where you have 4 hours to complete a portrait, and this year I'll be taking part in a larger national competition. And I've been practicing timed portraits from photographs sent by friends, mainly from the Hope Sussex community. These portraits will be on display at the Hope Sussex Music Festival in August, so get your tickets, come along and support a brilliant homeschooling project. As a result of this, I've decided to offer what I'm calling day portraits alongside my standard portrait commission. Normally I spend a week or two on a portrait, making sure the likeness is 100% accurate and offering revisions and complex backgrounds. My day portraits are simpler and cost only £350, a fraction of the cost of a full commission, and so far the response has been 100% positive. So if you're looking for something unique to either gift or have in your home, go to my website jakefern.co.uk and add it to your basket. I'm sure that you'll love what you receive.
That's all true, but I think it's a very dangerous direction to go in if we are saying that everything that's mainstream should be chucked in the bin.
I agree.
This is a very bad idea. And I mean, one example, and he won't, he can't mind anymore, but he wouldn't have minded me saying this. Ian R. Crane, I was producing his programs, and so I witnessed his health challenges as he lived with cancer. And the fact of the matter is, there was, just to give one example, there was no alternative solution to pain relief for him, right? And ultimately, he had to take pharmaceutical pain relief. Now so my point is there are some things, some areas where we can't avoid interfacing with mainstream, and I don't think we should be avoiding interfacing with mainstream. If we look in the journalism space, there are good journalists out there, not very many of them anymore, but there are and have been good journalists out there working in mainstream. And occasionally there is some good mainstream work done, but that doesn't mean. So we shouldn't be abandoning everything about the mainstream.
Well, this is the danger of the, if you know their name, they're in the game type mentality, I think. Right. And it tends to just shut everything down, doesn't it? If you think everything is that sewn up, then why even bother engaging?
Well, I mean, Brian likes to
extent?
say often, the world is not black and white, and lots of people seem to get caught up in this black and white view of the world.
Yeah,
it is shades of grey, and so it's how we navigate our way through that is part of the journey that we're all on.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you agree. We're interested in what you think, but it feels to me that people are so scared of being duped. Well, not scared, but they're so wary of being duped again. Once you realise you've been deceived to some extent, a lot of people are so desperate not to be fooled again, that they are wary of literally everything. They think everything is a lie. Literally every. I mean, I've actually, people will actually say everything is a lie. And I had this debate with someone yesterday. I said, "What? That's clearly not true. Not everything is a lie, because if everything was a lie, your car wouldn't start in the morning." So, like, at what point do you?
No, but I think what they mean is that everything that they're told is a lie.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Everything they're told about how fuel works, for example. At what point, are we breathing oxygen? Do trees, use chlorophyll, whatever? Like, because they will go that far. It's like literally everything is a lie. Everything we've been told in the mainstream is a lie. I think, well, how does that work, really?
Well, I think that this is part of the problem, in the sense that they announced, whoever they is, announced several years ago that we were heading towards a post-truth world.
Yeah.
So they told us what they were going to do to us. They told us they were going to carry out some kind of psychological operation to convince us that the truth is unknowable.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that the person who decides that everything is a lie and you can't know the truth has fallen for that gag, hook, line and sinker.
Mm-hmm.
Learning how to discern the truth surely that's the central goal of the truth movement, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah, totally. And that's why I think that's what I meant earlier when I said talking about this is just as important as talking about the details.
But part of this is that people, there's a couple of categories of people in the world. There's people that produce. You're a producer. You're producing something at the moment. We're producers because we produce information in a particular format for people. But most people are consumers. They just consume what's on YouTube or what's on the UK column or they right? And because there's no active participation in that, it becomes very hard to know, right? So what I have always said, and what I would prefer people do, is to take the information that we give and check it.
Yeah.
Just that simple process of checking something is a productive act. And that helps you learn how to discern what the truth is.
Yeah.
It's a very simple thing to do. But part of the problem is that people have decided that simple things don't achieve anything. And so they don't do even simple things.
Right. Okay. So what you mean they're looking for the big solutions?
Well, every other sentence out of my mouth at the moment is this is the problem, but it is the problem. This is why Donald Trump exists. This is why Nigel Farage exists. This is why these types of people exist. People are looking for the big hero to come and save the day.
The big hero, yeah. Okay, I'm with you. Yeah.
They've lost sight of the fact that they are the big hero.
Yeah.
Every single one of us.
Yeah.
By making a small contribution as a population, to make each person is making a small contribution to society in some way, that is what builds our future, but most people have abdicated that idea.
Yeah. Why? Why have they done that? Why do we do that? Why is it human nature, or is that part of the deception? Part of the
No, I think it's part of the deception. I think we've got to go back 40 years to the time of Thatcher. What was it? What was Harry Enfield's loads of money?
Oh, loads of money. Yeah.
Yeah, that was part of part of the psychological operation that's been played. This individualism. And the systematic breakdown of family as well has been a big part of this. And I mean, there's a whole host of examples that we could give of how people have been have had their agency taken away. Yeah. Even just even just by having a political system that's that's such a pile of crap that people don't want to be involved with it, and people become politically cynical. It's completely understandable. But instead of stepping in and trying to do something, then people just withdraw from it completely. Maybe this is a feature of human nature, but it's one we got to beat.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not saying the solutions are political, by the way. I'm just saying the solutions are in actively taking part in some capacity. Well, you know, and someday somebody's going to be creative enough to do something which is actually going to stick.
People are essentially, the way I see it, is people are so traumatized from the moment they're born. You know, look at, say, my wife's dad died recently. He was 80 something, and his dad was in the Second World War, came home from the war, broken man.
As so many did.
Had part of his brain taken out. That was the level of care, mental, you know, health care, that and became this kind of shell of a man who was his. So that was Vicky's dad's father. So that was Vicky's dad's role model. You know, and then you see these repercussions knocked down, don't you? So how like Vicky's dad wouldn't really engage with the world. You know, if I ever brought anything up in our kind of conversation or realm with him, it's shut down instantly. Now that's not necessarily because he's stupid or incapable, or, you know, I have to look at him and think, where's he learnt the tools? What tools has he got to deal with stuff that's uncomfortable? He's probably still reeling from his father being a broken man. And so it's all these kind of, and I think that ties in more to what you were saying about kindness with each other if we disagree, is always remembering. And I have to remind myself.
I mean, if you have been on the receiving end of, I mean, everybody's been on the receiving end of some form of trauma as a result of COVID, for example. I know, I appreciate that, okay. but everybody's been, right. So people have been traumatized by what happened over lockdown and all that kind of stuff, and of course, what was announced towards the end of the COVID period was this term that the World Economic Forum and others used, polycrisis.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So it was clear to us in 2022 or whatever that as we started to see this term rolling out into various documents, that we weren't going to get a chance to recover from that 2019 to 2022 period. We were going to get bombarded with crisis after crisis after crisis after that. Keeping people more and more destabilized. Yeah. And traumatizing trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. Yeah. And that's pretty much what's happened. So people haven't had a chance to recover from lockdown even. Mm-hmm. So then what happens if you're engaging with social media and you're getting nothing but abuse there, or you're engaging in a chat box and you're getting nothing but abuse there from people that are supposed to be more or less aligned with you on the arguments. Yeah. Then of course that is only increasing people's trauma. So, you know, I'm not sure I have any answers on how to deal with that, but you know, stepping back from that type of argument and just giving ourselves the time to think is good, so long as the result of that thought process is you know, you find another way to re-engage again.
I think what a lot of people struggle with is saying I'm not sure. You know,
or more than that, just saying actually I was wrong.
Well, that's the next. Well, I said that's the next step, isn't it? That's an even
and I have
bigger
to say
struggle.
But that right there is the key thing, because you know, too many of us are I'm right,
Yeah.
and I'm only ever right.
Yeah.
I mean,
But that's
we all do that to a certain degree. I'm not.
we do
I'm
do
not.
that
I'm
to a
not.
certain degree.
But
We do. But why do we do that? I think we do that because when we were little, you weren't allowed to. If you were wrong, you were in trouble. You don't get your sweets. You don't get your pudding. You don't get to play out. You learn, don't you, right from an early age, not to be wrong, to hold on to your story.
yeah.
You're the weak one if you're wrong, and we're just, our culture is so tight on that. There's absolutely no, in the school system, there's no education about it. We don't teach our children to admit that they're wrong, that it won't have dire consequences. It's like the consequences if you're wrong are pretty painful. And
Sure, but the mainstream never admits that it's wrong.
no,
So
well, they're just a manifestation.
if people in the community aren't prepared to admit they're wrong, then how are we better than the mainstream?
Exactly.
And surely that's the goal here, is we got to be better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Totally.
if you're not better, then you're not building something better.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you talk a lot about evidence. I think whatever you talk about, you'll say, okay, well, just show me the evidence, which for me is so fundamental. And if the evidence suggests this, yeah, I'm not attached to that. It's like, but people just get so attached to their worldview, whether it's veganism or carnivore or flat or globe or virus or no virus. We'll come to that, don't worry.
Chemtrail or contrail.
Yeah, exactly.
Because this is the big one at the moment.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that, because I'm no expert. I've obviously it's been circling, literally, metaphorically, for me for like the last 20 years. I remember when I first found out about chemtrails, I was angry, frustrated, felt powerless. I was like the mad person in the street, like just random strangers. Look at what's this? Do you think this is normal? And that's going back, I don't know, 20 years or whatever. Then there was a point where I just thought, whatever's happening, me shouting about it and getting upset about it certainly isn't helping. So I'll park it for a bit. And then since then, I've heard so many different takes on it. People who've worked in the military, people who, observe planes. So you tell me where you're at with it and why you think it's something worth.
There's a couple of separate issues here. One is what's actually going on. That's one thing.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
Now, if we're going to focus on what are we going to do about it, the only way to do something about it is to be able to communicate with people about it. Now, if your approach to communicating with someone who knows nothing about the topic is to go in with a sledgehammer and say, they're spraying us, they're going to kill us all, this is a depopulation agenda, what kind of reaction are you expecting to that? Now, that's on one side. The other side is, what are we actually seeing? And again, this comes down to, what does the evidence say? Mm-hmm. Right? Now, if what we're seeing every day, that we see persistent contrails in the sky spreading out and creating this milky grey sky, if what we're seeing every single day is a spraying operation of chemicals, well, where's the contracts? Where's the evidence that shows that planes are flying that are full of some kind of material to be sprayed? Where are the tankers that are doing this? And if our skies are filled with tankers that are spraying us, then where's the commercial aviation happening? Yeah. My personal view, I've said it many times, I'll say it again, I absolutely accept that there is weather modification experimentation going on. But what proportion of what we see is that, and what proportion of what we see is ordinary airline traffic? Now, if what we're seeing is ordinary airline traffic, then actually the big problem here is one of pollution. Yeah. And if the big problem is one of pollution, then on a day like today, when there are no contrails in the sky, has that pollution stopped? or are the planes still flying and still pumping out that stuff out the back? Well, I think that's exactly what's going on. The planes are still flying. They're still pumping out pollution. So what are we going to do about that? Just because it hasn't created a contrail today doesn't mean it isn't happening. What is being pumped out the back of aircraft? Where is that eventually settling on the earth? Is that landing on our But aside from that, actually, what is the bigger issue? Is the bigger issue what's being pumped out the back of aircraft, or is it what's being directly sprayed on our crops already by mainstream farming? Right. So the whole there's a whole can of worms here that could be discussed, but it can't be discussed if the attitude of the truther is it's chemtrails and they're spraying us and that's it, and I'm not having any other conversation. And the attitude of the non-chemtrailer is chemtrails are a conspiracy theory and I'm not going to get in because I don't talk to conspiracy theorists and there's nothing going on actually, and we don't need to worry about what airlines are doing. Right. Those two groups will never talk to each other. So how do we get
suits them totally fine.
It suits everyone totally fine. It particularly suits the airlines totally fine. Right. So if you're going to say that there's weather modification going on, show me the evidence. There is evidence for it, but it's pretty small scale compared to what we see on a daily basis. And so if that's not weather modification, then what is it? And if everything that we see is what weather modification, then show me the documentary evidence that proves that that's what it is. Because what this always comes down to, what the truth comes down to, is what is your threshold of proof that you're prepared to accept? What's the standard you're prepared to accept? And if the standard is below the standard of mainstream media, then you're no better than mainstream media. Right.
Well, this
is where the problem is. Here we go again.
Well, we're problem solving, aren't we? I mean, that's essentially what this whole thing is about, isn't it? We're trying to solve problems. We're trying to. So yeah, I mean, and then you get into that. There's a kind of truth in the normie accusation. Oh, you just watched a YouTube video, because unfortunately, to some extent, people in the movement are guilty of that.
That comes back to what I was saying earlier. Are you a producer or a consumer? Are you an active participant or a non-playing character? And if you're just consuming, then you're not actually, you haven't played any role in coming to the conclusion that you've come to. You've just sucked in information and said, yeah, that's true. Well, that's not true. The only way that anybody can be sure or get close to the truth is to actively seek out the answer just to a particular question. And just watching a YouTube video is not cutting it.
I mean, I don't want to be, there's some pretty good stuff on YouTube. So I don't
no,
want to,
for sure. Of course, we're all part of this.
Of course.
We're all part of this information space.
It's not to dismiss it because it's on YouTube, but it's the attitude, isn't it, that goes with that. Is like you say, the standard of
we've got to be actively challenging everything we see, no matter what the source. And that applies I expect people to do that to us. As much as I would expect that I would do that with every other piece of information that I find. Because if I'm not checking it and confirming it either way, then I'm not doing my job. And it's tricky. It's tricky because at times when you do engage with people, and you see that they're not even thinking logically, regardless of who's right or wrong, they're clearly just not thinking logically. They're not. Their arguments they're
aren't
not thinking
sound
at all. I mean, for example, I got an email this morning that said, what was it? I'm confused by your position on chemtrails, and that was it, just one sentence, and then posted a link to a Twitter post from Andrew Bridgen where he's taken a video clip of a plane with a contrail coming out the back. And that was it. So there's no argument there. There's no discussion. I've discovered this. I've discovered that. Here's why I think what I'm thinking. It's just I don't get your position. Well, that doesn't advance the
No,
conversation at all.
This is it. And well, then it's tricky because you get into the area of why that is. So yeah, forget all the, well, not forget, but taking into account all the trauma and the psychological problems. But are people capable? I mean, are people actually capable of putting together a logical argument? So I'll give you an example again, and I don't spend all my time arguing with flat earthers, but it comes up now and again. I was on Stephen A. Young's Substack. He's a astrophysicist who I think would be described as a flat earther, and I commented, and someone made a comment under his post. Well, people see the Earth. They see the moon go across the sky, and they see the sun go across the sky in the same path, and yet they think the moon is going around the Earth, but the Earth is going around the sun. Okay, so they're making some kind of logical claim that because the moon and the sun appear to do the same thing in the sky, they must be both doing the same thing. So I simply said, like, I was very calm, and I really make sure I'm calm and don't get emotional. I said, based on let's not assume the heliocentric model is correct, but if we use the heliocentric model, that is what you would see. So if the moon was going around the Earth and then we were going around the sun, they would both appear to be crossing the sky, which is true. You know, you can't like that. So you point out something very logical like that, and then I was basically accused of having sex with animals. You know, because, and I'm just thinking, I'm all I'm doing. I wasn't even making a claim for the heliocentric model. I was simply saying, if the heliocentric model is true, we would see what we see. So your critique of the heliocentric model doesn't make sense.
So last year, forever. Since the flat Earth thing really took off, the flat Earth community has acknowledged that there can be, or they have claimed that there can be, no 24-hour sun in Antarctica. Because if you imagine the pizza model, then of course their sun never. You can't have a 24-hour sun on the pizza model.
No, because it has to be,
because the sun's always north of Antarctica, which runs around the outside, right? Because the sun's always on the inside of that.
Yeah, because just to explain to people who might not be sure, that if the standard flat Earth model is the one that most people argue for, is basically there's a flat disk, the South Pole
is the pizza crust,
is the crust, is the external perimeter, and the North Pole is bang in the middle, right? So and the basic idea is that the planets aren't moving, we're stationary, and then the sun and the moon circle above the flat plane.
That's it.
Right, that's the standard model. So therefore, what Mike's saying is that you can't have a 24-hour sun because
you're right on the edge, and so you're as far south as it can go. So the sun can't go further south than you, so you can never. Right. So I can't remember the guy's name, but a guy in the States sponsored some Globers and some Flatties to go to Antarctica for the winter solstice last year, and there were a number of flat earthers went, and
many refused to go.
Many refused to go. I think the two that did go, there were two or three went, but one of them stood by his words, where he said, you know, if I see a 24-hour sun, I'm abandoning the flat Earth. So you know that, but the amount of absolute vitriol that the people that went got from the flat Earth community, from the people inside their own flat Earth community that had been their best mates right up to that point, and because the people in the flat Earth community viewed it as being some kind of ideologically unchallenged. I mean, it's worse than the worst sort of heretic religion, Spanish Inquisition.
It really is, isn't it?
Yeah. And so again, if people are setting themselves up to be better, they've got to be better, and that is not better.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's just more of the same, isn't it? Just more of the same. And it's interesting you say, about the evangelical sort of religious aspect to it, because when we went to Sounds Beautiful Festival year before last, there was a flat earth tent, and they even had a sign which basically implied that without flat earth you weren't gonna ever be happy or reach a state of oneness with God, or
right.
it was incredibly sort of damning, and like it was the most important thing on the planet to know, And this again, it's just more okay. We're trying to unpack how we move forward, because we can do all the hard work that the UK column has done for 20 years, and you can inform people and you can give people facts. But if they're still going to get caught up in mind games and emotional drama, and if they're not going to actually be rigorous with their thinking, it's going to be of limited value, isn't it, to a lot of people? And I suppose maybe that's just the way it has to be. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would go further. No value.
Okay. Yeah.
So
yeah.
that. But as I say, this is the journey we're on. We're on it as much a fight with ourselves as it is with anybody else.
Yeah. I mean, how do you see? Well, we could talk a little bit about, because I don't know what your beliefs are in terms of religion, soul, spirit. What's not manifest here? I don't know if it's something that you've talked about much. I found it really interesting because we interviewed Brian. So Brian's talking more about that aspect of his worldview recently. How does that sit with you, going back to what the UK column means to you, your relationship? But we could talk a little bit about your relationship with Brian, because that's a long time to be working closely with someone, isn't it? You must have a lot of brotherly love, or you laugh, but I think that's a yes.
Look, we have clearly, we're still here.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, that side of things, this is not an active part of my life at this time. Now, I'm open-minded about spirituality and beliefs and so on, and I find it all very interesting.
Yeah.
But that's not an active part of my life at the moment.
Yeah.
So let's just say agnostic, perhaps.
Yeah.
So I'm not atheist, and I'm not in any way anti-spirituality.
Sure.
So I wouldn't find myself challenged by people having strong faith.
Yeah.
But I think that faith is absolutely something which is personal and isn't even something that can be transmitted from one person to the next. It's a purely internal thing.
Yeah, I very much agree with that, and having seen a lot of people move towards what I would describe as a kind of dogmatic Christianity over the last three years, maybe, particularly, where they seem
that again, it's the same mentality, actually, because it's
100%,
somebody over there who I think is better than me is telling me what I have to think and what I have to believe, and actually there's no spirituality in that whatsoever. No. It's just ritual. It's just going through emotions, and that's we're just defeating ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's probably the most anti-spiritual approach to life that you can have, actually.
I agree completely. Yeah. I think, for sure, what you've just said, you summed it up. It's not something that you can be prescribed or communicated from one to bit. It's a very, very personal, experiential thing, which is what seems to, again, going back to the similar point, is that people seem to struggle with that responsibility. They're still looking for something external to define them. So whether that's a religion or a belief, whether it's a belief in EastEnders or Coronation Street, or a belief in flat Earth, or a belief in Epstein files, or a belief in, it's like, unless you're actually, for me, we talk about standard of evidence. Really, very little, just like in science. True scientists will admit nothing can be proven. There is no proof in science. There's only your best model, really, isn't there? Was what fits our observation and predicts what we see is the best model.
That is pretty much the way the world works as far as the human is concerned. We have a model and do the facts fit the model?
Yeah.
But we've got to have the guts that if we come across a single thing that breaks the model, we've got to say, right, well, that's not the truth then. And we've got to be finding another model or adjusting the model.
Yeah.
And I think if we look at the history of organized religion, and maybe if we look at people's at the things that people believe in, and whether a lot of people will say science has become scientism. It's become a religion in and of itself, and I have quite a bit of sympathy for that position, because actually a lot of scientists are just as bad, if not worse, in this area, and the idea from a lot of commentators out there, particularly, amongst the community of debunkers that are going around that use terms like this is established science. No, that's what we have at the moment that best fits the model that's been created so far. That is, so if that's what you consider established, then fine, but don't tell me that it's unchallengeable, because it's absolutely challengeable.
Yeah.
Everything is challengeable.
Yeah.
So, but that, I guess people are people, and no matter what our branch of life, we have a tendency to fall into these wanting to categorize everything and put silos around everything and so on.
I think people just struggle with uncertainty. They just struggle with uncertainty, and then whatever way they can, who maybe it's a survival thing. You wake up in the morning, you want to know what you've got to do, and you don't want to be burdened with too much conjecture and theorizing. So perhaps it's just part of how we've evolved, whatever.
Yeah.
But
happy to accept that.
But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be in a position now where we move forward from that. And I think what we call the truth movement, really, that for me is what it's all about. That's its main reason for its main power is to get us beyond that point where we're just accepting what we're told. And unfortunately, it seems like too many people are still stuck in that. What are some of your, so going back through your life, you lived in France, didn't you, for a couple of years before joining the UK colony?
Yeah.
All right. So we
just took a career break.
What was your career at that point?
Well, I mean, my career was tech, infrastructure, and I worked in a host of different sort of industries and whatnot, but ended up working for a hedge fund.
Oh, okay.
And I suppose the day I started, I mean, I had a certain view of the financial system and whatnot, but I wasn't really familiar with what hedge funds specifically did when I joined.
So you joined as a tech guy?
Yeah. So I was running that part of the organization.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was a sort of middle-sized. Well, when I started, it was I think $1.5 billion under management, and then when I left, it was about 4 or 5
Okay.
billion. And
Did
so
you take your share of that expansion?
not as much as I should have. But no, I mean, it was fairly clear that I was not going to be comfortable with working in that business for any longer than it was.
For ethical, moral reasons?
Yeah.
Or financial?
I mean, I definitely saw some things that at a certain level were absolutely impressive. I mean, I don't know if you've seen. I mean, everybody knows what happened in 2007, 2008, but and there've been a couple of movies made about that. One was called Margin Call.
No, I've not seen it.
Well, basically, the premise of this was it was sort of a dramatization of what happened in 2007, 2008, and the premise was that this financial organization suddenly recognized that they were doing mortgage-backed securities, and they suddenly recognized that they were in a financial position where if the markets moved in a particular way, a very small way, that they would end up owing more money than the entire value of the business.
Oh, right.
And so they decided that they were going to be the first company that pulled the plug and effectively bring the whole system down. But I saw a situation very like that while I was working for the hedge fund, where they've got themselves in a position where they were facing an existential threat, and I saw the techniques that they used to get themselves out of that situation. And in one sense, it was very impressive, the financial engineering that they did to deal with that. But what we've got to realize is, it's called the financial industry, but the idea of an industry is that you're producing something.
Yeah.
But the financial industry isn't producing anything; they're just stealing from each other. So it's a shell game. It's how much money can I take from that guy over there? And of course, many people are finding, if they've got a pension fund or whatever, increasingly back in the well, when did I start for that company? 2002, 2003 it was. And I had a mate a good friend was running an organization sort of providing help for elderly people in Belfast, in Northern Ireland, and they had investments which were kind of a nest egg, and at that time I said, well, I'm working for this hedge fund now, you should invest in that kind of thing. And they said, oh no, we've got very clear limitations on where we're allowed to put our money, and we're right. And in those days, pension funds, it was the same. They were not allowed to invest in hedge funds or some of these kind of alternative products. And of course, everything's been deregulated, and now lots of people's money is invested with these types of companies. But the point is, it's just about stealing money from the other guys. So you can invest your money with your pension fund, and that money ends up being invested in hedge fund A, and hedge fund B is trying to steal that for their right. So the other thing that sort of I didn't like very much was the attitude from some. I wish this is a direct quote from someone I was working with. I wish this war would get started so that we can, this kind of attitude was not compatible with my view of the world. So so I was there for a few years, and then that was the end of sort of that type of commercial work.
Right.
And
did that coincide with an awareness of what was going on in the world?
No,
generally,
I'd been writing since 96 or 97.
So prior to that, you'd seen
Yeah,
a lot.
but, yeah. You see, in '95, myself and another guy set up one of the first internet companies in Northern Ireland. It failed spectacularly.
Right.
And
Why?
Partly timing, partly naivety, and
Right.
basically probably that was not the time I should have been starting a business.
Okay.
So I think if we'd managed to keep it going for another 6 months or something, we ran out of money. If we'd managed to keep it going for another 6 months or so, probably we would have survived a little bit longer. But no, that didn't quite work. But anyway, that sort of got me into the internet at a fairly early stage, and I was already starting to write about stuff.
Oh, okay. What was your first subject then that you were?
Oh my God, I can't
taken
remember.
with.
I can't remember, but no, I mean, in terms of wakening up, Northern Ireland woke me up.
Right. Okay.
You know, when I was, I think I've told this story. When I was 11, my dad started a business in Belfast, and he'd been going for less than a year, and the industrial estate he was on was blown up, and then we found out from someone we knew in the police that they had watched the bomb being put in the car, they'd watched it being driven down the road, and they'd been told to leave it alone. And so then you got to ask why. Because why would the RUC, as it was in those days, be not worrying too much about this kind of thing? And of course, the protection racket was going on. All the paramilitary groups were running the protection racket, and I would assume, I don't know, but I would assume there was brown envelopes being passed, which meant that there was no intervention happening from the police.
Yeah.
So that started my journey, asking questions about how the world actually works. My concern in the meantime is just how badly polluted the information space becomes. What we do now can be a bit addictive. It's just something
That's all right, isn't it?
I'm just choosing to believe it at this stage in my life. You know, he noticed us sitting there, and his face went ashen. So you know that's just another example of a small victory.